In the center of the planet, there sleeps the great Earth Dragon, a being of incomprehensible might. So immense is his power that even his dreams change the world, granting special individuals on the surface extraordinary powers beyond those of mortal men. This is the Earth of the Mirage universe, and you're listening to the Mirage Barrage. The Marquis carefully placed the dirty penny onto the thin metal rail. It sloped downward at a gentle angle, the edges slightly raised, making a track just a bit too wide for the penny. A bubbling giggle slipped out from the Marquis's watery smile as he placed a finger on the rim of the penny, standing it on its edge. He flicked his finger back across its edge, spinning it while pushing it forward against the motion of the newly acquired spin. A split second later, the Marquis flicked on his power and the numbers started running through his head. The penny should have skittered forward and then seen its rotational momentum reverse, becoming a spinning wheel on its downward journey, but the power imbued into it by the Marquis changed all that. The split second after it was released, the momentum of the penny was preserved, its backspin, its falling motion. The Marquis giggled again at the contrasting momentums now permanently trapped together. Well, trapped together, preserved, for as long as he continued to hold his power active. The Marquis's power allowed him to preserve the momentum of an object in motion that he had touched a split second before. So now, the penny would continue downwards on that trajectory no matter what. Nothing would stop it. In fact, as it veered slightly off course, the penny carved its way through the lip of the metal track, never once slowing. A smallish man, a little too round, rushed into the small rocky room. "Marquis," he said, panting. The Marquis's wide, insane eyes nearly rolled, but he was too focused on the numbers, on counting down. There was a loud thud somewhere deeper in the mountain. Perhaps the little man, Victor, was here because of something to do with that. "Marquis, the Archbishop needs you," Victor panted, and then a disgusted look came over his face as he took in the scene. One of the soldiers who had been stationed on the Mediterranean island with the ICBM was now strapped to the wall on his knees, forehead level with the bottom of the metal ramp. The penny, spinning in reverse, throwing up an occasional spark as it scraped against the metal ramp, inexorably made its way towards his head. "What are you doing to the prisoners?" Victor demanded. "Those aren't yours." "Victor?" the Marquis purred, eyes never leaving the penny as he counted down the last seconds. "Didn't you have something to tell me?" "Yes," Victor stammered, caught between two pressing matters. "It's the Stormbreakers. They're here." "Not to worry," the Marquis answered. "But the Marquis held up a finger as his face became exceptionally manic and the scream began. A moment later, and silence descended onto the room once again. The Marquis closed his eyes and sighed deeply as all the numbers faded away. "If you're quite finished," Victor began, trying to push some authority through the discomfort in his voice. "I told you not to worry," the Marquis chided gently. "By now, the Archbishop has already won." He had been right. Moments before, the Archbishop Uriah Mass had donned the Iron Fist and swept the room with a power that tore at the very molecules of everything before him. The Stormbreakers, a little too late, had been caught in suspension and were held up in the tearing field, entirely at the mercy of the Archbishop. Well, not entirely. 3 of the Stormbreakers put together just enough thought to each come up with their own desperate attempt at escape. The first was the one who could most easily strike. Even as the grip of the Iron Fist tore at his crystalline body, the Psycherge's mind was unaffected. Immediately, he released a psychic attack that flared out from his body and then turned straight towards the Archbishop. Archbishop Uriah Mass felt the stab at his mind, the surface layers of his psyche being shattered. Before he could think, his extensive ritualistic training kicked in, leveraging the rest of his mind automatically. This second nature is all that kept him from losing his ethereal grip on the Stormbreakers. Psycherge's attack was snapped back almost as soon as it had started. The Archbishop reeled for a moment, then mentally caught up with what had just happened. Too close. This would not go down well, and he had to be careful, and quick. He pressed his middle finger and thumb together and concentrated, forcibly dispelling the fog that had briefly engulfed his mind. He held on to the other supers, but pressed on Psycherge. Kid Cosmos felt the static that held his every molecule shift, as if each particle was fighting to streak towards a point just to his right, to Psychurge. He tried to tear his eyes away and look towards his compatriot, but he couldn't. The immovable grip of the iron fist held him firm. But then he heard the cracking. The focused power crushed in on Psychurge, and soon his translucent red body shattered into a million pieces. The indecipherably small fragments shot through the air and then hung there, sparkling and reflecting the light into rainbow strands, a whimsically fantastical sight that contrasted sharply with the horror of what had just happened. Kid Cosmos lanced out with the cutting force of his eye-beams, almost literally staring daggers into the Archbishop, but he couldn't aim them. Archbishop Mass flinched as they flew past, too far left, and began to cut through the altar behind him. Crystal Crusader took the opportunity to strike as well, loosing his crystal spirit. The inescapable grasp of the Iron Fist proved to be all too escapable for energy, and that meant the crystal spirit zipped out unhindered. It zipped straight for the gauntlet, pressing itself into the metal, trying to meld with it. But the gauntlet was a powerful artifact forged almost directly from the nature of the great Earth Dragon. Even a powerful, otherworldly sprite like the Crystal Shard Spirit could not supplant that power. The spirit was ejected instantly from the gauntlet, but never stopped moving. Zipping back and forth, it soon set its gaze on the hard surface below the Archbishop's feet. The blue streak fused with the stone floor just as Uriah Mass realized what it was doing. No. He felt the ground beneath him tremble. The Archbishop gazed fiercely at the two outsiders, Kid Cosmos and Crystal Crusader. Not just two threats, two powered abominations in his sanctum. He jabbed his fore and middle fingers outward with a flick of mental focus, tossed them back into the wall, plowing them through dozens of feet of solid rock. The crystal spirit saw what happened. The energy it had left with Crusader to protect himself was rapidly dwindling. Instinctively, it streaked from its perch within the floor of the cathedral room back towards its partner, leaving the floor where it had been, a half-raised, distorted mess, the beginning of a giant hand forming to grab the Archbishop, forever now incomplete. As Crusader and Kid tore through solid rock at terrifying speed, Crusader's shield struggled to protect him. It was ripped apart, the last vestiges of energy spent trying to save him, and the rocks began to dig into his body. Only a moment later, the crystal spirit re-entered its home in his crystal eye, but the damage had been done. In that second, his body had torn through 3 feet of volcanic rock, and at that speed, with that much rock, damage had been done. Kid Cosmos and Crystal Crusader burst out the other side of the volcano, into the sudden harsh light of day. And then they were shot off, even faster than before. The force pushing them suddenly no longer restrained by a literal mountain in its way. They were thrown high into the air and watched helplessly as the island began to shrink away from them. No, not helplessly, Kid Cosmos realized. The force that had held them immobile in the cathedral room wasn't there anymore. With a burst of energy to his feet, Kid pushed out through the bottoms of his feet. His power emanated force from them, and carefully adjusting it, Kid Cosmos fell into the familiar rhythm and began to fly. Even aching from being shoved through a mountain, it was easy for him to swoop down and snatch Crystal Crusader from his fall. "Fines, you alright?" Kid asked his companion, hanging limply from his arms. He didn't answer. Instead, a smaller voice responded, "He's alive, but unconscious. Kid, he's hurt bad." "How bad is it?" Kid Cosmos started flying back towards the island. "Bad. Several bones have been broken. We're lucky there's no internal bleeding. He also..." Crystal Crusader began to drop as Kid gasped in pain. He was flung backwards as the shaft of the arrow shoved the toxic point deeper into him, fighting past his tough exterior. He recognized that sickly feeling. Xenocyte. A xenocyte-tipped arrow. The arrow wasn't stopping. It was continuing on, almost as if he wasn't there. Except he was being dragged along for the ride, at least until the arrow made its way through. Then, it suddenly stopped. Half plunged into his stomach, the xenocyte tip sapped his powers, and he was helpless to watch Crystal Crusader plunge towards the beautiful blue ocean below, himself following shortly behind. On the island of Fogo, the Marquis rolled his eyes around towards Victor, who was standing behind him. Stepping down from the hidden window opened on the side of the mountain and lowering his bow, the Marquis turned to the smaller man. "Happy?" he asked. At least that xenosite didn't go to waste, Victor said, almost acknowledging the Marquis's question. The price has dropped. The government has come into quite the supply seized from Griffin Industries, and now we're starting to see some of that slip through their fingers onto the black market. You'll be fine. Victor shook his head. One of these days your flippant attitude won't go so overlooked by the rest of the church. The Marquis suddenly leaned down, pressing his face and bugging eyes uncomfortably close to Victor's. You think I'm not committed? You think I don't believe? Victor gulped at the intensity. All thoughts aside from how to get away without arousing further manic acts were banished from his mind. I tell you, no one wants the dragon to wake more than I. It will be woken, and it is the church that is holding me back. They want to see their god. I will ensure it. It is only their ego, their sad clinging to the ephemeral phenomenon known as their lives, which holds them back. The eyes, already so open they were nearly round, opened wider, the pupils constricting to tiny points. How about you, dear Victor? Do you believe? Do you want to see it? Victor's brain caught up with him. In a near panic, he pushed the arm the Marquis had raised down hurriedly. No, listen to the Archbishop, Victor insisted, sweat pouring down his forehead. He met the gaze of the insane man, and slowly the latter raised himself up and calmed down. Very well, he said. I'll wait. It shouldn't be much longer, anyway. And with that, he turned on his heel and stepped out of the little room. Victor let out a deep sigh and pulled out a pocket watch. 5 seconds after the Marquis left. Victor whimpered with strained exasperation. Never fast enough, not even close. The Marquis had been right about one thing. It would be soon. Then Victor would have his answers. Kid Cosmos slammed into the ocean surface. Technically speaking, hitting the surface of an ocean isn't as bad as hitting a concrete floor. But Jeremy Allross would have sworn that it wasn't. The impact, combined with his weakened state from that xenosite, nearly stripped away all of his consciousness. What remained stung and screamed pain. Then it strained even further until Kid realized he was straining for air. He moved his arms, felt he still had control over them, and tried to figure out which way was up. He saw that most of the light was coming from one direction and decided to go that way. He broke the surface and sweet relief filled his lungs. Unfortunately, it didn't help any of the rest of his pain. But there wasn't time for that. Crystal Crusader had also hit the water somewhere around here, and he had been unconscious before. If Kid didn't find him soon, he was going to drown. Kid cried out for him, but scanning the horizon only showed the waves around him and the islands in the distance. Then, out of nowhere, a brilliant aqua light shot into the air and burst like a miniature firework. The Crystal Spirit. Kid Cosmos immediately began swimming in that direction, the aeroshaft dragging against the water painfully as he did so. But he made it. He saw Crusader's white uniform against the sea, his head being held aloft by the Crystal Spirit. Kid grabbed him and made for the nearest island, but his arrow wound was slowing him. Kid, you're wounded, the Crystal Spirit said. Aha, noticed that, did you? Wait, you're not going to make it like this. Let me help. How exactly do you figure you're going to... The spirit flew from Crusader, now held upright by Kid, and dove into the water. A moment later, and Kid felt a sharp pain. Do that. Ow! What are you... Then the sickness left him. Doing? The crystal returned to its place. What just happened? Kid asked. I fused with the xenosite tip, the spirit explained. Then I simply pulled it out. I took the liberty of wrapping bits of your uniform around your wound as well. You still need some first aid, but it should hold up until we get to shore. Oh. Well, nicely done, Kid commented. That's a neat trick. You'll find I'm just full of surprises. Good to know. But what about Fines? Can you help him? Get us to shore. That may be a problem. Sekhmet Scion suddenly realized she was upright, arms bound, outstretched, whereas her legs were held together. Suddenly awake, she turned her head side to side and realized she was embedded into the rock wall, Renaissance Man and Dauntless Dynamo similarly embedded to her right and No Man to her left. All slightly lower to her. Actually, they were arranged like a pyramid, with her at the top. Then she saw the colorful geometric paint arrayed in a large circle around each of them. Looking across the huge cavern, she realized what they were. On the wall opposite them, 5 large circles were painted as if they were stained glass windows, but instead of saints as the central figures, the stylized images of Sekhmet Scion and the other Stormbreakers were there, their brightly colored costumes disturbingly appropriate in the center of the vibrant display. But their mirror images had one extra that they lacked. On the far wall, there was a painting of Psychurge. To Scion's left, the position opposite from Renaissance Man, one down from her, Psychurge's spot was empty. "I do apologize," Archbishop Mass said. He was standing a few feet back from them to take in the full display. The lava Scion had noticed before only covered a small portion of the floor in a ring at the center of the enormous, stadium-like cavern. "Under different circumstances, we would have liked to lay the red carpet out for you." The others were awake. Dynamo strained at the metal braces attached to his limbs. Unfortunately, they held him just far enough from the stone that he couldn't touch it. "Diego Diaz," the Archbishop acknowledged him. "You have been gifted with the power to build up energy with every step taken on the Great Dragon's Earth." "Gee, do I do that?" Diego cut back. The Archbishop ignored him and continued. "With that kinetic energy, you can create your legendary speed and many other things, though you cannot store this energy long. You will find that your stores have run out, unfortunately." Dynamo had discovered this as soon as he woke, and was instead trying to bend his hand and fingers back far enough to touch the inner wall of the volcanic chamber. It wasn't working. Rashida carefully watched as the Archbishop stepped to the other side of the pyramid, to No Man, the other man making the bottom of the triangle. "Li Qiang, you have the subtle and sometimes underestimated gift of creating and manipulating fields that sap the momentum from any object entering them. You bring them to a stop, be it relative to your hand or to your environment. A quite useful gift, though you will find it unhelpful in your current predicament." No Man didn't answer, and the Archbishop didn't seem to mind that. He stepped to the side slightly and directed his gaze towards Renaissance Man. "Reynold Ringer, you possess a simple gift, yet one of such utility. You have been given eternal life and youth. Emperors would give their realms for such a gift. The knowledge you possess is invaluable, incalculable, and yet you are still limited by your all-too-human body." And finally, to Sekhmet Scion, he said, "And Rashida Queen. It is Queen now, yes? The myriad of powers you possess, your history, your legacy, a daughter so much like your mother and grandmother, and yet so unlike as well. Each in your line possess the abilities of strength, endurance, resistance to damage, as well as the more incredible. A mythical touch which can affect the health of others in numerous ways. When your skin touches theirs, you can stun, paralyze, make drowsy, enfeeble, or sicken them. On the other hand, you can do much of the reverse, and heal just as well as harm, which is to say nothing of your own remarkable healing ability, and everything you have done to make this gift you've been given even more potent. And you have escaped the curse. For each daughter of the line of Sekhmet is born almost exactly as her mother in all except mind, a vessel being ready for the spirit of Sekhmet I to be inhabited by this ancient, malevolent spirit, or so it was, and always had been until you stopped the spirit from passing to you and set out on a new brave journey." "You're well informed, but I hope that wasn't meant to flatter," Rashida said coolly. No, not at all," Archbishop Mass said, lowering his face. "It is merely to display my reverence, in the hopes that you will accept my sincerest apologies for this ugly necessity." "You mean imprisoning us," Renaissance Man said flatly. The Archbishop pursed his lips. "Yes, that is what I mean. I hope you will come to realize we mean you no harm. It is just that, even though you carry sacred pieces of the dragon within you, I doubt you will understand our cause." "You believe the great Earth Dragon is a god, because he is," No Man said. "A being not just of incomprehensible might, but with a mind beyond our understanding. One who even in sleep can create heroes. One so sophisticated that perhaps every event in human history was mapped out by his unconscious thoughts. A being who can give peace and meaning to every individual on the planet, each in his own way, just as he grants unique powers to some people, if only he were to awake. Because once awakened, paradise would be a simple thought to him. What cost could be too high for eternal peace and salvation? Archbishop Uriah Mass looked at No Man's Mask for several seconds. Yes, exactly, he finally said, smiling. Except, how do you know your god is a kind one? Renaissance Man interjected. What a strange question to come from a man who is the very answer. The great Earth Dragon has sent us legends, heroes, who fight for the greater good of all. What more proof is needed? He sends villains, too. Don't forget that for each hero there is a monster out there causing pain and suffering that wouldn't exist if the dragon were not here. This is an unfortunate grasping attempt, I'm afraid. The proof is obvious. The monsters of this world often appear as they are, monsters. They are hideous distortions of nature, a perversion of the natural order, whereas heroes are harmoniously melded with their divine gifts. A creature like Gorger is given gifts accidentally, and because they are accidental, he is mutated. All the more reason that the great Earth Dragon must be awoken, so that no such accidents may happen again. You assume. Someone like Gorger might take more work to create. After all, he is not simply given a gift and left alone. He must be reshaped, but reshaped in a way where he may still walk, talk, and fight. If he was an accident, why isn't he just a mess on the floor? Don't we see these messes on the floors, though? What is that but sickness, starvation, storms, disaster, and all manner of accidents? I've been to other worlds, Archbishop, Sekhmet Scion interjected. They have accidents and disease just as much as Earth does. Perhaps, Mass dismissed. But many don't have the solution we have before us. You're obfuscating, Renaissance Man shot in. You don't know if the great Earth Dragon even cares about we bugs. Paradise may be worth any cost, but what if it isn't there? How much are you willing to throw away in the end if you get nothing or worse? And Renaissance Man looked over to where Psychurge was supposed to be. Uriah Mass let out a deep sigh. That was a tragedy. One which I deeply regret had to be done. That's easy to say, Renaissance Man cut in. All too easy, Uriah Mass agreed, surprising the immortal hero. I thought it had to be done, but I cannot be so arrogant as to claim my actions unimpeachable before our Savior. He turned towards the ring of lava in the center of the room. It was only then that the Stormbreakers noticed the man sitting in the island in the middle. He wore only a white robe, his bare feet sticking out and somehow unburned by the waves of heat. In fact, none of him, from his toes to the very top of his shaved head, showed any sign of burns or even discomfort. This is Edward, the Archbishop said. He is one of our most gifted brothers. Without him, this place would not be possible. He has control over the volcano, Sekhmet guessed. He has influence over the natural elements of the earth, the land and that which is beneath it. But he is more than just a powerful individual. He is devoted to the great Earth Dragon, having forged a unique connection with him. In order to create this place, he meditated until his mind merged with that of the dragon, or at least a piece of the dragon. He achieved all of this power at the cost of much of his conscious life here. That said, he gained another gift. We know the great Earth Dragon is benevolent in part through the messages he gives us directly from the dragon. That can't be, Diego said, astonished. No one has ever made contact with the dragon. Edward has, Mass stated. It will be through him that the dragon may condemn me. As Sekhmet processed what he had just said, another priest walked up and took the elaborate red and white robe from the Archbishop. Bare-chested and barefoot, Uriah Mass stepped towards the ring of lava. What is he doing? Diego asked. Putting his faith to the test, Renaissance Man growled. If the dragon forgives or condones his actions, he will walk safely across the fire. That's insane, Diego insisted. Very possibly, No Man agreed. But if this super, Edward, does have this power, he may be able to control the lava enough for him to pass. And the Archbishop believes him to be the mouthpiece for the dragon, Renaissance Man continued. He will be safe if the dragon wants him to be. Supposedly. And if the dragon doesn't? Or he's just wrong? Diego asked. You already know the answer, Sekhmet replied simply. Uriah Mass reached the edge of the lava ring. Even with him facing away from them, the Stormbreakers could tell he was soaked with sweat. But even so, he was not scalded or burned as he should have been. He held a bare foot out, and then, for a second, it looked as if he wouldn't do it. But then he stepped forward confidently, his foot plunging towards the magma. And he was walking across the molten rock. The Stormbreakers stared, not even Diego making a comment. Uriah Mass strode across the ring, arms outstretched to either side, palms up. After a dozen steps, his right foot stepped onto solid rock once more. He kneeled and bowed his head before Edward, a whispered conversation taking place far out of earshot of the Stormbreakers. What does this mean? Diego finally asked, unsure. He got lucky, Renaissance Man said, not quite as convicted as usual. Or, No Man said carefully, there is some truth to what they say. Sekhmet Scion sucked in air, trying not to consider the possibility, but instead, all that meant was she focused on how she would be watching helplessly as the most dramatic event in human history might be about to unfold before her. The awakening of the Great Earth Dragon. Archbishop Mass was stepping back across the lava again, but this time his hands were in front of him. He was holding something. Sekhmet squinted but couldn't tell what it was through the heat waves. Not until it got closer. What is that? Diego asked. No, Scion said, understanding suddenly washing over her. What is it? Diego asked again. It appears to be some sort of stone tablet, No Man noted. He was right. It was a small tablet made of limestone with several hieroglyphic carvings on it. Prominent among them was a large ankh. Uriah Mass stepped back onto the cooler stone and reclaimed his robes. He brought the tablet to the Stormbreakers. You asked what cost we were willing to pay, the Archbishop said. We won't have to pay with any more lives. Now, we can wake the dragon directly. As you may know, there aren't many supers from earlier than the 1930s. When looking back hundreds of years, it is far more common to find items or objects of power rather than people of power. This tablet is one such object. It is an object of immense power, and we know it connects with the dragon. For it is the tablet which created the curse. It created Sekhmet the First. Rashida Queen felt her jaw clench. Once again, her ancestors were coming back to haunt her. Kid Cosmos dragged Crystal Crusader up the rocky beach. They had made their way to Brava, the smallest inhabited island of Cape Verde. Small as it was, and though it was inhabited, they had washed up on an uninhabited portion, and it would be no quick trek to one of the towns. Instead, the heroes were washed up on the rocky green isle, in a part devoid of human life. Spirit? Kid Cosmos asked, suddenly aware he didn't actually know what else to call it. Yes, the spirit answered, apparently unbothered. How's Fines? He'll be all right, I think, but I have to get to work immediately. Before, you said he had broken bones. I know you can fuse with, material, but can you really just fix them? No, the spirit replied bluntly. Biology is too complicated for me to simply put bones back together. I'd be doing more damage than good. Remember, a human body needs everything down to the cellular level to work. I'm just too blunt for that. But you can do something, Kid said hopefully, recalling the spirit's earlier words. Yes, the spirit replied confidently. The Crystal Crusaders have plans for this sort of thing. Each one has an implant with biomonitors and nanomachines with supplies. I will direct the nanomachines and use the supplies where necessary to hold the bones together. The delicate work will be done by the nanobots, and I have the biomonitors and databases to consult to make sure I'm healing and not harming. Oh, good. It'll just take time, and I won't be in contact. I have to concentrate. I understand. Let me know when you begin. There was no response. Okay, then, Kid said, and sat back and took stock of his own situation. He was pretty hurt from the arrow wound, and after the xenocyte and long swim, he was rather tired. And then he saw them. 2 figures descending from the sky, something else with them. They were descending towards him. Comrade Cosmos, Ironclaw, and the fragments of the Broken Man all descending towards them. Kid Cosmos had just leapt to his feet as the 3 commissars landed 10 feet away. "What are you doing? How did you find us?" Kid demanded, ready for a fight, but painfully aware he was at a great disadvantage. And Crusader, he was helpless. "Relax, Jeremy," the commissar said, slightly more warmly than previously. "We are not here to fight." "Oh, really? You've just dropped out of the sky on top of us for a social call. How did you find us?" "We were already on way to this island. Our investigation of certain activities back home led us to pursuing the suspects here. While conducting surveillance, we saw a strange flash. I suspect it was from your companion here," he said, indicating the Crystal Crusader. Kid realized he must have been right. The firework that the spirit used to direct him to Crusader must have been what they saw. "It seems you beat us to these people," Comrade Cosmos said. "As we have previously established, they are enemies of both of us. You seem to have had a run-in with them. Tell us what you know, and together we will finish this job." "Sharing information with you isn't always healthy," Kid said through gritted teeth. "Jeremy, you are too suspicious. Don't call me that. It's your name. Yeah, and you don't have the right to use it." Comrade Cosmos paused a moment. He hit it well, but an expert could tell he was exasperated. "There are so few of our kind on this world," the comrade continued. "I had hoped we could at least be civil. Your father and I—" "He's dead, and I care about more than just the Ashvelians on this planet." Comrade Cosmos thought another moment, then said, "I will give you a few minutes to calm down and reconsider." He then turned to his companions as if Jeremy didn't exist, and they stepped away to begin plotting. A few minutes later, and Crystal Crusader began to cough and hack. Kid Cosmos rushed up and leaned him further up so that he could spit out anything he might choke on, but he was all right. "Kid, we all right?" he asked. "What's our status?" Kid sped through as much of what happened as he could, finishing with the arrival of their unfortunate company. "Yeah, things could be better," Crusader agreed. "The way I'm feeling, it's going to be at least an hour before I'm even close to up to speed, and really, I should be out of it longer than that." "Then I'll call into headquarters," Kid said. "We get the Stormbreakers support teams, whatever other teams are out there, everyone we can find to come in and smash this base." Crusader nodded. "Yeah, do that. But there's a problem. The way I figure it, if they've got that glove, that means they're already connecting with the Great Earth Dragon. We could be out of time. We have to move now, and there's only one group on site that's combat ready." He nodded towards the commissars, and Kid looked back at him in disgust. "You've got to be kidding." "Wish I was, but I don't see anyone else coming to our rescue. Reinforcements will take a couple of hours at very best. We call them just in case, of course, but someone's got to go back in." "I don't like this," Kid said. "Look, if they've rigged up that gauntlet, it doesn't mean they know how to wake the dragon. If they did, it should have happened by now. Either way, it's not like they can hurt anyone without leaving that island." "No one except the team," Orson reminded him. That made Kid pause. "Yeah, you're right." Frustrated. "If it was just you and me, you know I'd be charging right back in there, hopefully with more of a plan, but charging nonetheless. Thing is, we go in with the commissars and we're practically handing over the team to them. How is that any better?" "Better the devil you know," Crusader replied. "I don't think you'd say that if you had any personal experience." "Maybe I do," Crusader countered. "We don't have much time, Kid. We're running up the risk. But we need to heal a little so we can go in with them, so go call reinforcements, and then come back, and we'll talk." Kid did so. It wasn't long before he got a message through, but everyone kept asking questions. He sped through a brief report as fast as he could, but he could already tell the response was going to be slow, even with everyone scrambling in a panic. With the commissars nearby, he didn't want to leave Crusader alone too long, so he cut it short and returned to him. You ever wonder why the Crystal Crusaders bother pairing up people with these crystal spirits? Orson asked. Kid sat down next to him. I guess, he answered, not really interested. I also wondered why they don't have names, but I figured there was a reason. They do, Crusader replied. They just only tell them to people they really, really trust. And the reason we're all paired up is because as powerful as they are, and as wise as they are as a group back in the Crystal Cove, apart, alone, they are just as susceptible to the pitfalls we all face. Maybe even more. You really should be healing, Kid said. I am. Spirit tells me in an hour I'll have basic functioning again, though he's been sure to inform me many times that I'll be darn near killing myself going back in there. Anyway, we got just a little time to kill, and this is important. You watch the commissars. I have a story for you. The starship, a long, angular spire occasionally dotted with hexagonal panels and surrounded by 6 short wings, though they were not wings in the sense that they pushed air to allow for flight, appeared to shoot out from nowhere. As the warp drive spun down, the 2 Crystal Crusaders checked the status readouts and readied themselves for what they might find on the planet below. A much younger Orson Fiennes turned to his partner, Levon Adams. While Fiennes was light-skinned and light-haired, Adams was dark. But both were large, with close-cropped hair, and both trusted the other implicitly. What do we got? Fiennes asked. Although he had been the first Crystal Crusader from Earth, had laid the foundations for more to join, Adams had climbed the ladder further than he. He clicked with the organization more, had more of a vision, a passion, and as a result, quickly climbed the ranks. Orson hardly minded. The 2 were good friends. Plus, Fiennes preferred being slightly more behind the scenes. It kept him away from the bureaucrats and let him focus on the real work. Nothing on sensors so far, Adams said, though that didn't seem to dampen his spirits. Looks more like a cakewalk than the desperate distress signal we were told. They still seem to have doubts about sending 2 humans out without backup. Are we really surprised? Fiennes retorted. No, Adams admitted. But keep your eyes peeled. If there really is a 13th sapient species out here, we're about to make Crystal Crusader history. Fiennes turned around. You lobbied for this assignment, didn't you? Adams shrugged. I may have. Like I said, it's probably nothing. So Cove wasn't all that worried about just sending us. But if it is something, Fiennes prompted, then we'll get our pick of assignments for the rest of our careers, Adams said, grinning broadly. One of the instruments started buzzing, and Fiennes turned to acknowledge it. Preliminary scan of the planet is done. Good, let's see it. Adams slid into the command chair just behind the pilot and co-pilot seats. Tapping a few buttons, he went through the data the ship had collected. Well, what do you know, he said, satisfied. Signs of habitation, traces of manufactured compounds, organized settlements, architecture and infrastructure. Interesting. Seems most of it is confined to a few large cities scattered across the planet. Pretty sharply defined borders, too, but no walls. Strange. I wonder if... Hang on. Evasive action! He suddenly shouted. Fiennes twisted the controls immediately, but the warning had come too late. The Crystal Crusader craft was designed to handle virtually any possible situation or damage, but this was more than even it could handle. In a second, the hull twisted and crumpled, and then was shredded into dozens and dozens of free-floating strips of metal. If it weren't for the split-second reactions from the crystal spirits, the 2 Crusaders would have been flung off into the abyss, never to return. As the scraps of the once state-of-the-art ship drifted down into the atmosphere of the blue and yellow ball below, Levon Adams and Orson Fiennes watched, contained within orbs of oxygen and nitrogen, shielded by their ephemeral counterparts. What just happened? Orson asked. His voice wouldn't travel beyond his own bubble, but his crystal spirit was linked with all the others. It transmitted his voice to Adams's spirit. Look over there, Adams replied, pointing towards the edge of the disk floating before them. Fiennes could see a small black blot, but he could see it. From orbit. It had to be huge. What is that thing? The problem, Adams replied simply. Let's get down there, quick. Soaring down to the surface, Adams and Fiennes saw a charred husk of one of the isolated cities. The towers were cracked into pieces, the streets torn up, and the landscape itself warped and twisted. The blot they had seen appeared to have traveled through it. Adams and Fiennes touched down at the edge of a second, intact city. They noted that there appeared to be several towers with advanced silvery guns dotted about these outskirts. Strangely, they didn't see any inhabitants. That is, until they stepped one street over. "Hey, stop that!" Adams said and ran towards a crowd of black feathery creatures. "Break it up," Fiennes echoed, intuitively relying on his crystal spirit to translate. Unfortunately, it slipped his mind that the spirit hadn't yet gotten snippets of their language to work out the translation. The aliens were little waist-high creatures with domed heads and cylindrical bodies. Their little feet were just visible poking out from under their skirts of black feathers, and their arms appeared to shoot out from the feathered coats and retreat again. Their faces were merely two deep red eyes and a small snout, and about 7 of them were swarming on top of a lone creature in the center of the pile. Adams and then Fiennes rushed in and started pushing the creatures apart, pulling one after another out of the dog pile, but most were just tossed back a few feet and then they dove right back in. One didn't. It chittered at them excitedly, standing at Fiennes' feet, but the spirit couldn't yet translate. A few words started to come through, like "stop" or "understand," and then, all at once, it was over. The little creatures backed away from the one in the middle, who appeared hurt, but quite alive. A couple picked up the wounded one, brought him to his feet. "What just happened?" Adams asked. Fiennes could only shrug in response. The creature that had been chittering before carried on, desperately trying to get his message through. Eventually, the spirit caught up, and it did. "Apologies, strangers," it was saying. "I understand this must seem very strange to you. We understand this is something unique to our species." "We have translation," Fiennes said to Adams, though more for the creature's benefit, as Adams surely was hearing it too. "A group doing violence to a lone individual is not so unheard of," Adams said gravely. "Oh, you can hear me. Good. I had hoped you brought translation devices," the creature said. No, you misunderstand. We have observed some of your alien cultures, though you'll have to pardon us. I do not recognize your species." "We're humans," Orson explained. "Kind of new to the galactic scene." "Ah, I see. Now that you mention it, I seem to recall something about a new species discovered in one of the intercepted newsreels." "You watch alien news feeds?" Yes, the alien chirped happily. "It is much like the entertainment to us. It is a fascinating universe out there, though one we will never get to see firsthand, for the same reason as the display you just saw." Adams was about to ask another question, but the little creature cut him off. "Please, it'll be faster if I simply explain. Please observe that Ilahimna over there was not harmed severely. You can see that he is being brought to a healing center right now. That is because we wished him no true harm. This was for his own good." Orson's eyes narrowed. "Our species is called the Amnala, and we have learned through watching others of the galaxy that we are very different. Though small to many such as yourselves, we are the most dangerous of all, especially to ourselves. You see, we have evolved a strange and unique ability. In times of distress, one of the pack will be selected, often quite by chance, sometimes the one most under stress or the one in the right place, but one will undergo the change. In this change, he will grow, sprout wings and fangs and claws, and utterly lose his mind, save for the desire to destroy whatever caused this stress, such as a roving predator that threatened the pack. And if he cannot destroy the threat right away, he will grow and grow and grow until he can, and when he is done, he will die." "Wait a moment," Adams interrupted, this time the little Amnala allowing it. "You're not telling me that this thing we saw from orbit is one of you?" The Amnala bowed his head in shame. "It is." "You have to be kidding me," Fiennes interjected. "That's got to be the single largest creature in the galaxy, excluding the great Earth Dragon and the like." "Our people have a legend. It goes by different names in different cities, and each varies slightly, but the idea is quite the same. It is a tale of a being from beyond the physical world, a spirit, a devil, that will one day take hold of one of us and thirst for destruction eternally, growing until it swallows the galaxy. We are afraid that that day has come." Wait, time out," Adams said. "What does this have to do with you beating on that other Amnala?"
"Ah, yes, that," the little creature said, cheering up slightly. "You can imagine how dangerous it is to undergo the change, how frightening it is, and how much damage one can unintentionally do. Well, just because we've built cities and our spaceships doesn't mean we don't have stress. It's just now our problems cannot be solved by getting bigger and nastier. Just because you hate your job does not mean eating your boss will solve anything. Especially not since the change takes your life."
"Are you saying beating them stops it?" Fines asked skeptically.
"If you're careful, yes," the Umnala said, bouncing his head up and down while keeping his feet planted firmly.
Perhaps this was their form of vigorous nod.
"If injured, but not too severely, it does not benefit the pack for the Umnala to transform, you see. An injured Umnala won't grow as big, and since the change will be lethal, it is better for everyone if he doesn't change and hopes instead to be rescued by others. Our bodies know that, so if one is about to change, we strike them until they no longer will. Of course, if they are too injured, the body may realize it will die either way and then transform regardless. One must be careful, but insistent."
"So by putting this man in the hospital, you saved his life," Adams suggested.
"Yes," the Umnala said, happy they understood. "It is of course a very serious matter, but it is one we have learned to deal with. It also helps if the one who is about to change has their pack, family or loved ones, around him. If they are not in distress and can calm him, his body will usually realize there is no danger that the change will solve. Usually."
"But if there's only strangers around, you beat them," Orson said.
"Please understand," said the alien, concerned now. "This used to be a fairly rare phenomenon. We take care that it is not necessary. But with the arrival of the devil, many have fallen into despair and anxiety."
"You mean the big one," Adams clarified.
"Yes. We don't know how. We don't know why. But someone from City Utala underwent the change. No one there to stop him. Perhaps he lived alone, and his caretakers were not there. However it happened, he changed and began his reign of terror. At first it was a minor story. These things are very dangerous, but they happen. But he kept growing, and growing. After he destroyed Utala, the city governors all convened and agreed our defenses would not be enough. We had sworn ourselves to secrecy, away from the galaxy so no one else would have to bear the burden of our change. But we could not handle this alone. That is why we called for help to the stars."
Fines and Adams looked at each other. "This is bad," Fines said. "If the defenses of a city can't stop them, what are we supposed to do?" "Call in backup," Levon said grimly.
"Please," the Umnala said urgently. "It is already making its way to the city. Your ships will not get here in time. Surely there is something you can do."
The Crusaders exchanged glances again. "Give us a second," Adams said, and turned towards Fines. With a nod to the side, he indicated for his partner to join him. "What are you thinking?" Fines asked. "I am going to call for backup," Adams said. "But after that, this little guy's probably right. We have to do something." "What do you think we could do against that thing?" Orson asked, pointing towards the giant black cloud on the horizon, slowly growing since they arrived. "Maybe nothing," Adams admitted. "But if we can get close, find a weak spot, do some real damage." "You're serious?" "The Bismarck, mightiest battleship of the German Navy in World War II, was sunk by a torpedo from a measly biplane. Don't underestimate the little guy." "You know, I may be no history buff," Fines countered, "but I'm pretty sure a couple of battleships were also involved in that tussle." "Yeah, but the biplane made the strike that turned the tide." Orson shook his head. "So much for our promotion." "Really? You don't think they'll offer it posthumously?" "Great. I was supposed to be the pessimist. If you're thinking like that, now we're really doomed." Adams gave him a big grin. "Be the biplane, Orson." Orson sighed and strapped his shield back into place, preparing for the suicidal run. Next time on the Stormbreakers, we revisit the team in captivity, learn more of the dragon cult and the strange members within, find out if Cosmos' commissars can be trusted, and learn the secrets of Orson Fine's past. All this and more next time on the Mirage Barrage.